The sharp crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek as Prudence Keller ducked behind a water trough, clutching her frayed shawl tightly around her shoulders. It wasn't the first time the 19-year-old had witnessed trouble in the small frontier town, but today's commotion provided an unwelcome backdrop to an already difficult day. The year was 1876, and the Montana Territory remained as wild as the day the first settlers had arrived. Prudence had come west with her father after her mother's passing, hoping for a fresh start. But her father's sudden death from fever last winter had left her alone, working as a seamstress in Mrs. Holloway's dress shop to survive. The gunfire ceased as quickly as it had begun, followed by the heavy thud of boots on the wooden boardwalk. Prudence peered over the edge of the trough to see Sheriff Adams dragging a drunk miner toward the jailhouse. "Coast is clear, folks," the sheriff called out. "Just drunk Eddie causing trouble again." Prudence rose, brushing the dust from her simple blue calico dress. The tattered shawl, the last gift from her mother, hung loosely around her shoulders. Its once vibrant emerald green faded to a pale shadow of its former glory, threads hanging from worn edges. She knew she should replace it, but she couldn't bear to part with her final connection to home. "Well, look who it is," came a shrill voice behind her. Prudence the pauper, still wearing that rag, Vivian Porter, the banker's daughter, stood with two other well-dressed young women. All three wore expensive dresses with fashionable bustles and carried delicate parasols to shield their fair skin from the harsh western sun. "Good morning, Miss Porter," Prudence replied politely, though her fingers tightened around the worn fabric of her shawl. "I swear that thing looks worse every time I see it," Vivian continued, her lips curling into a sneer. "It's practically falling apart. Even the beggars would turn it down." Her companions tittered as Prudence felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to remind them that not everyone had a father who could afford to order dresses from San Francisco, but she bit her tongue. Causing a scene would only make things worse. "I need to get to the shop," Prudence said, attempting to step around them. Vivian reached out suddenly, catching the edge of Prudence's shawl. "Really, it's embarrassing to the whole town. We have standards here, even on the frontier." "Please let go," Prudence said, her voice barely above a whisper as she tugged gently, afraid the delicate fabric would tear. "What's going on here?" A deep voice cut through the tension like a knife. Prudence turned to see a tall man dismounting from a chestnut stallion. His presence commanded attention: broad shoulders, dark hair beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and eyes the color of a summer storm. She recognized him as Quentin Lawson, the new rancher who had purchased the old Miller property outside of town. "Just giving Miss Keller some fashion advice, Mr. Lawson," Vivian said sweetly, releasing the shawl and turning on the charm she reserved for eligible men. "That ragged thing she insists on wearing is hardly proper." Quentin's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Though he'd only been in Willow Creek for a few months, he'd quickly built a reputation as a fair man who didn't tolerate nonsense. "That's so," he said, his voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable edge. He turned to Prudence, his expression softening. "That's a mighty fine shawl, Miss Keller." Prudence blinked in surprise. "I thank you, Mr. Lawson. The craftsmanship is evident even from here," he continued. "European, if I'm not mistaken. The kind worn by ladies of quality back east." Vivian's mouth dropped open in shock as Quentin stepped closer to Prudence. "My mother was from Boston," Prudence found herself saying. "It was hers." Quentin nodded knowingly. "I thought as much. That particular shade of green and that pattern, it's royal to me. Shows breeding and refinement, not like those mass-produced items from the catalogs." The sincerity in his voice left Prudence speechless as Vivian and her friends exchanged confused glances. "Now, if you ladies will excuse us," Quentin said, offering Prudence his arm. "Miss Keller promised to help me select fabric for new curtains at my ranch house. I value her refined taste." Without thinking, Prudence placed her hand on his offered arm. The wool of his coat felt rough beneath her fingers as he led her away, his stallion following obediently behind. Once they were out of earshot, Prudence found her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson, but you didn't have to do that." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "I don't abide bullies, Miss Keller, never have, never will." He glanced back at Vivian and her friends, who were watching them with sour expressions. "Besides, I meant what I said. That shawl clearly means something to you, and that gives it more value than anything those women are wearing." Prudence felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. "It's the last thing my mother gave me before she died," Quentin nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then it's priceless." He glanced toward the dress shop where Prudence worked. "I wasn't entirely lying about needing fabric. My housekeeper's been after me to make the place more livable. Would you actually help me pick something suitable? I'd be grateful for a woman's perspective." Prudence hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I'd be happy to, Mr. Lawson." "Quentin, please," he said, a smile warming his features. "If we're to be shopping for curtains together, we might as well use first names." "Prudence," she offered in return, feeling a flutter in her stomach as his smile deepened. "Well, Prudence," he said, the name sounding different special somehow in his deep voice. "Shall we?" Mrs. Holloway was delighted to have Quentin Lawson in her shop, especially when he ended up purchasing not only fabric for curtains but also for tablecloths, napkins, and even a new quilt. Throughout the selection process, he deferred to Prudence's judgment, treating her opinions as valuable and her taste as impeccable. "You have quite an eye, Prudence," Mrs. Holloway remarked as they wrapped Quentin's purchases. "Perhaps you should consider interior decoration along with your sewing." Quentin leaned against the counter. "She certainly saved me from making some terrible choices. I was eyeing that bright yellow fabric when I first walked in." They all laughed, and Prudence felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. "Would you do me the honor of having dinner with me tonight?" Quentin asked as they finished. "To thank you for your help." Prudence hesitated, suddenly conscious of her simple dress and worn boots. "That's very kind, but I insist," he said, his gray eyes holding hers. "The hotel restaurant at 7, Mrs. Holloway nudged her gently. "Go on, dear, you deserve a night out." Prudence found herself nodding. 7 would be fine, thank you." After Quentin left, Mrs. Holloway turned to Prudence with a twinkle in her eye. "Well, that was interesting." "He was just being kind," Prudence replied, though she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. "Kindness is one thing, dear. The way he looked at you is quite another." She patted Prudence's hand. "Now, let's see what we can do about a dress for tonight." Despite Prudence's protests, Mrs. Holloway insisted on lending her a dress she had just finished for another customer. "She won't need it until next week, and it's nearly your size. With a few pins, it will be perfect." The midnight blue dress was simpler than the fashions Vivian and her friends wore, but the cut was flattering, and the color made Prudence's blue eyes appear deeper and more vibrant. "You'll keep your shawl, of course," Mrs. Holloway said as she adjusted the fit. "It complements the dress beautifully." At 7 precisely, Prudence entered the hotel restaurant, her heart pounding with nervousness. She spotted Quentin immediately, standing as she approached the table. "You look lovely," he said, his eyes warm with admiration. Dinner passed in a blur of comfortable conversation. Quentin told her about growing up on a farm in Pennsylvania, his time driving cattle in Texas, and his dream of building a successful horse breeding operation in Montana. Prudence shared stories of her childhood in Massachusetts, her father's work as a teacher, and their journey west after her mother's death. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, "but I'm making my way." "That's more than most can say," Quentin replied. "It takes courage to keep going after losing everyone." As they finished dessert apple pie that couldn't compare to her mother's but was delicious nonetheless, Quentin cleared his throat. "I'm hiring a few more hands for the ranch," he said. "And my housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, has been asking for help with the main house. Would you consider taking on some sewing work for us? Curtains, linens, that sort of thing?" Prudence considered the offer. I'd need to check with Mrs. Holloway. I wouldn't want to neglect my duties at the shop." "Of course," he agreed, "but the pay would be good and—" He hesitated, then continued more softly, "and I'd enjoy seeing more of you." The directness of his statement caught her off guard, but the sincerity in his eyes gave her courage. "I'd like that too." Their dinner ended with Quentin walking Prudence back to the small room she rented above the hardware store. At her door, he took her hand gently. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," he said. "Thank you for standing up for me today," she replied. "Not many would have." "Any decent man would have," he said, then with a smile added, "though not every man would have been lucky enough to gain your company for dinner as a result." His candor made her laugh, and as she watched him walk away, Prudence felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Over the next few weeks, Prudence divided her time between Mrs. Holloway's shop and Quentin's ranch. Mrs. Holloway had readily agreed to the arrangement, especially after Quentin brought his cowboys into town to order new shirts and pants. "Quite the businessman, your Mr. Lawson," Mrs. Holloway remarked. "Knows how to keep everyone happy." "He's not my Mr. Lawson," Prudence protested, though the idea sent a pleasant shiver through her. The ranch was a 30-minute ride from town, and Quentin insisted on either picking her up himself or sending one of his most trusted hands with a gentle mare for her to ride. The main house was larger than Prudence had expected, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and plenty of windows to let in light. Mrs. Garcia, a kind-hearted widow originally from New Mexico, welcomed Prudence warmly. "That man has been living like he's still on a cattle drive," she said the first day. "All function, no comfort. It's about time we civilized the place." Together, they transformed the house. Prudence hung the curtains she'd carefully sewn, arranged the new linens in the cupboards, and added touches that turned the house from a mere building into a home. Throughout it all, Quentin was appreciative and generous, always asking for her opinion and valuing her input. One evening in late September, as autumn painted the surrounding hills in gold and crimson, Quentin invited Prudence to stay for dinner. They ate on the newly furnished porch, watching as the setting sun cast long shadows across the valley. "You've worked magic here," he said, looking at her instead of the view. "Hardly magic," Prudence replied, feeling her cheeks warm under his gaze. "Just a woman's touch." "Not just any woman's touch," he corrected. "Yours specifically." As darkness fell, he lit a lantern, its gentle glow creating a cozy circle of light. In the distance, a coyote called, answered by another farther away. "I never thought I'd find this kind of peace," Quentin said after a companionable silence. "Growing up, my pa was always chasing the next opportunity, moving us from place to place. Even when I was driving cattle, it was always about the next trail, the next town. And now," Prudence asked softly, "now I want roots, a place that's mine, a future." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Someone to share it with." The implication hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Before Prudence could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. One of Quentin's hands, Jake, rode up with another man Prudence didn't recognize. "Sorry to interrupt, boss," Jake called out. "Ryder came in with news from town, thought you'd want to hear it right away." The stranger dismounted, removing his hat. "Mr. Lawson, name's Cooper, sir. I work for the stage company. There was trouble in town this afternoon. Bank robbery." Prudence gasped. "Was anyone hurt?" Cooper nodded grimly. "Bank manager took a bullet. Doc's with him now. Sheriff's forming a posse to go after the gang. They headed north toward the mountains." Quentin's jaw tightened. "How many?" "4 men. Masked. Took about $2,000 from what the teller said." Quentin turned to Prudence, apology in his eyes. "I need to get you back to town, then join the posse." "I understand," she said, though fear gripped her heart at the thought of him pursuing dangerous men. The ride back to town was tense and quick. Main Street was unusually busy despite the late hour, with groups of men gathering equipment for the pursuit. Sheriff Adams was giving instructions in front of the jailhouse. As they approached Prudence's lodgings, Quentin pulled his horse alongside hers. "Stay inside until we return," he said. "These men could circle back." "Be careful," she replied, unable to hide the worry in her voice. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the reins. "I'll come find you as soon as I'm back. There's more I want to say to you." The weight of those unspoken words followed Prudence as she watched him ride toward the sheriff's gathering. That night, sleep eluded her as she imagined Quentin facing danger in the darkness. Morning brought no news, nor did the afternoon. By the second day, anxiety gnawed at Prudence as she tried to focus on her work at Mrs. Holloway's shop. "They'll be back soon," Mrs. Holloway assured her. "Sheriff Adams knows those mountains better than anyone." It was late on the third day when the posse finally returned. Prudence was closing the shop when she heard the commotion. Running to the street, she saw a line of weary riders coming into town. Her heart leapt when she spotted Quentin among them, though he rode slumped in his saddle, one arm bound in a makeshift sling. She pushed through the gathering crowd as the men dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. Quentin winced as he swung down from his horse, his face pale beneath a layer of trail dust. "Quentin," she called out, no longer caring who might notice her familiarity. He turned at the sound of her voice, relief washing over his tired features. "Prudence." She reached him as he swayed slightly on his feet. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed him. "Bullet grazed my shoulder. Doc can fix it up quick." Sheriff Adams approached them, nodding to Prudence. "Your man did good, Miss Keller. Tracked those outlaws when the trail went cold. If not for him, they might have gotten away clean." "Did you catch them all?" she asked. "All 4, the sheriff confirmed, and recovered most of the money. Mr. Porter will be pleased." As the sheriff moved on to address the crowd, Prudence slipped her arm around Quentin's waist. "Let's get you to the doctor." He leaned on her more heavily than she expected, confirming her suspicion that his injury was worse than he admitted. "Sorry about this," he murmured. "Not exactly how I planned to see you again." "You're alive," she said simply. "That's all that matters." Doc Wilson's assessment was both better and worse than Prudence had feared. The bullet had indeed only grazed Quentin's shoulder, but he'd lost blood and developed a fever during the hard ride back. "He needs rest," the doctor told Prudence as he finished bandaging the wound. "And someone to keep an eye on that fever. Normally I'd keep him here, but with Mr. Porter still recovering from his gunshot, I'm short on space." "I'll look after him," Prudence said without hesitation. The doctor raised an eyebrow. "That wouldn't be proper, Miss Keller." "I'll stay with them," Mrs. Holloway volunteered, having arrived to check on Quentin. "We can set him up in my back room at the shop. There's space enough, and Prudence can tend to him during the day while I'm there." Doc Wilson considered this, then nodded. "That'll do. I'll stop by in the morning to check on him." Once settled in Mrs. Holloway's back room, Quentin fell into a restless sleep. Prudence sat beside him, regularly replacing the cool cloth on his forehead as his fever rose through the night. In his delirium, he spoke her name often, along with fragments of thoughts and worries. "Prudence, should have told you, before I left, not brave enough." She held his hand, whispering reassurances. "I'm here, you're safe now." By dawn, his fever broke and he opened his eyes with clarity for the first time since returning. "Prudence," he rasped, his voice rough from thirst. She helped him sip water. "How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by my own horses," he admitted with a weak smile, "but better for seeing you." Over the next few days, Quentin recovered quickly under Prudence's care. Word spread through town about how she had hardly left his side, and about how he had tracked the outlaws when others had been ready to give up. Even Vivian Porter visited, bringing a basket of food from her mother and a surprisingly genuine thank you for Quentin's role in capturing the men who had shot her father. "Papa is recovering well," she told them. "The doctor says he should be up and about in another week." As she was leaving, Vivian paused at the door, her eyes falling on Prudence's ever-present shawl, now carefully mended with nearly invisible stitches. "That is a beautiful piece," she said without a trace of her former mockery. "The color suits you." Once Quentin was well enough to return to his ranch, Prudence found herself facing an unexpected emptiness. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to their conversations, to the way his eyes followed her movements with warmth and appreciation. A week passed with no word from him, and Prudence tried to convince herself that it was for the best. Perhaps his near brush with death had changed his mind about putting down roots. Perhaps the things he'd said in his fever were nothing more than delirium. Then one crisp October morning, as golden leaves swirled in the street, Mrs. Holloway handed Prudence a letter. "From the Lawson Ranch," she said with a knowing smile. Inside was a simple invitation, written in Quentin's strong hand. "Prudence, if you're willing, I'd like to show you something at the ranch. I'll come for you Saturday at noon. Yours, Quentin." The word "yours" made her heart skip. She read it again, tracing the letters with her fingertip. Saturday dawned clear and cool. Prudence, dressed carefully in her best dress, a new one she had made herself from fabric Quentin had insisted on buying her as thanks for her nursing care. Her freshly mended shawl completed the outfit, its green hues bringing out the richer tones in her chestnut hair. Quentin arrived precisely at noon, looking fully recovered and more handsome than Prudence remembered. He helped her onto the wagon seat beside him, his touch lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low. "Thank you," she replied, feeling suddenly shy. "You look well. Your shoulder has healed, good as new," he assured her as he guided the horses out of town. "Though I might not have healed at all without your care." The ride to the ranch was filled with comfortable conversation, catching up on the events of the past week. As they approached his property, however, Quentin took an unfamiliar turn. "I thought we were going to the main house," Prudence asked, curious. "We're taking a slight detour," he explained. "There's something I want you to see first." The wagon wound up a gentle slope until they reached a clearing overlooking the valley. Prudence gasped at the view the ranch spread out below them, the mountains rising majestically in the distance, and the afternoon sun casting everything in a golden light. "It's breathtaking," she said. "I thought you might like it," Quentin replied, helping her down from the wagon. "This is my favorite spot on the entire property." He led her to the center of the clearing, where she was surprised to see several wooden stakes driven into the ground, forming a rough rectangle. "What's this?" she asked. Quentin took a deep breath, suddenly appearing nervous. "This," he said, gesturing to the stakes, "is where I plan to build my home." Prudence looked at him in confusion. "But you already have a home. The main house, that's the ranch manager's house," he interrupted gently. "It was always meant to be temporary for me." "This," he swept his arm to encompass the clearing, "this is where I want to build something permanent, something that will last generations." The implication of his words made Prudence's heart race. "It's a wonderful location," she said carefully. Quentin turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Prudence, when I was lying in that makeshift camp with a bullet wound and a fever, thinking I might not make it back, I had only one regret, that I hadn't told you how I feel." She held her breath as he continued. "From the moment I saw you in town, standing tall despite those women's cruel words, I admired your strength. As I got to know you, that admiration grew into something deeper, something I've never felt before." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet pouch. "I'm not a man who believes in waiting once he's certain, and I am certain about you, Prudence Keller." From the pouch, he withdrew a ring, a delicate gold band set with a single emerald surrounded by tiny pearls. "The color reminded me of your shawl," he explained softly. "The first thing I noticed about you. Royal, like I said that day, and worthy of the remarkable woman who wears it." Tears filled Prudence's eyes as he dropped to one knee before her, the ring held out in offering. "Prudence, I love you. I want to build not just a house here, but a home with you." "Will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up within her, breaking free in a tearful laugh. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, Quentin, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share. "I have something else for you," he said when they finally parted. Returning to the wagon, he retrieved a package wrapped in brown paper. "I ordered this from San Francisco the day after I met you. It arrived while I was recovering." Curious, Prudence unwrapped the paper to reveal a shawl of the finest cashmere, in the same emerald green as her old one, but with an intricate pattern of silver threads woven throughout. "It's exquisite," she breathed, running her fingers over the soft fabric. "I don't expect it to replace your mother's," Quentin said quickly. "I know how precious that is to you, but I thought perhaps on days when you need to preserve the original, you might wear this one." The thoughtfulness of the gift moved her deeply. "It's perfect," she said, wrapping it around her shoulders alongside her mother's shawl. "Both of them are perfect." They were married in the town church the following month, with Mrs. Holloway beaming from the front pew and even Vivian Porter offering sincere congratulations at the small reception that followed. Prudence wore both shawls, her mother's carefully draped over her wedding dress, with Quentin's gift adding an extra layer of warmth against the November chill. By the following spring, their new house was complete, a spacious two-story home with wide windows to capture the magnificent views and a wraparound porch where they could watch the sunset together. Prudence filled it with touches that reflected both their tastes, creating a warm haven that welcomed visitors and promised comfort to all who entered. As the years passed, the town of Willow Creek grew and changed. The railroad came through, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Quentin's horse breeding business flourished, becoming known throughout the territory for the quality of its stock. Prudence opened her own dress shop after Mrs. Holloway retired, specializing in both practical frontier clothing and more elegant designs that incorporated elements from her Eastern upbringing. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, who filled their home with laughter and energy. And on each child's 18th birthday, Prudence presented them with a special gift. For the boys, handcrafted vests with elements of her original shawl incorporated into the lining. For their daughter, a carefully preserved section of the shawl transformed into a delicate lace collar. "So you'll always carry a piece of your heritage with you," she told them. "A reminder that worth isn't in how something appears to others, but in the love and history it holds." On their 25th wedding anniversary, as they sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, Quentin took Prudence's hand, his thumb brushing over the emerald ring that had never left her finger. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this life with me?" Prudence smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Never, not for a single moment." He kissed her temple gently. "Remember what I told those women about your shawl that day we met, that it was royal to me?" "I remember every word," she said softly. "I meant it then, but I didn't yet understand how true it was," he continued. "You've created a legacy here, Prudence. A dynasty built on love and strength and determination. If that's not royal, I don't know what is." She thought of their children, their home, the life they'd built together from nothing but hope and hard work. Of how far she'd come from that lonely, grieving girl clutching a tattered shawl. "We created it together," she corrected gently, "and that's what makes it truly precious." As the last rays of sunlight gilded the valley below, Quentin drew her close for a kiss that held all the passion of their youth and all the depth of their years together, a promise kept and renewed with each passing day. And around Prudence's shoulders, carefully preserved and lovingly mended, her mother's shawl still rested, a testament to endurance, to memory, and to the transformative power of being truly seen by someone who recognizes your worth.